episode, I think this is 54, I'm beginning to lose count, of the Technology for Good show. And we've got two co-hosts this week. Hi guys, could you introduce yourselves? Chris, you go first.
Hi, Chris Kernahan, semi-regular co-host, SAP mentor, cloud architect, lover of technology. Thank you very much for having me again, Tom.
Not at all. And John?
Hey, John Reed, co-founder, Diginomica, ugly American. What else can I say given some of the content this week?
Well, John, I tell you what, just for anyone who's unaware, what is Diginomica?
Well, our website has been launched for 2 years now, and we're just really dedicated towards looking at issues in enterprise software and mostly sort of what you might call digital transformation themes, and we're trying to kind of look at it from the vantage point of what's really working and what doesn't. So we're trying to get off the hype cycle, Tom, try to make sense of this stuff, but it's not as easy to get off the hype cycle as you might think. So.
and Diginomica is available online at diginomica.com?
It is. It is.
Okay. Who's writing there, and what kind of subjects do you cover?
So, under the digital transformation umbrella, you could see everything from stories about the expected sort of cloud mobile analytics. I guess they call it SMAC now. I don't really call it. That's one acronym I'm unwilling to use.
Okay.
You might see some interesting use cases if you time it right. We try to write about customer experiences, ups and downs. You'll see some strong opinions. We try to take positions on the topics that we cover, and it's an advertising-free website in a certain sense, and if someone calls and says, I want to advertise on your site, we say no. So there's no annoying pop-up ads or autoplay videos on our website, which is sort of cool. But we do have a sponsor content model, so we do have a number of partners who contribute content, and they're visible on our website, and so you can tell pretty quickly from our website sort of who's behind it financially, and then it's really up to you to judge whether you think we've done a good job with that arrangement or not. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I would invite readers to give it a try and see what you think.
Okay, cool. So I think now, having done the intros, we should head into the stories.
Yep.
And we have as usual, a crap load of stories to get through, and I'd say given who we have on today, the chances of our getting through 10% of the stories are probably pretty low.
Pretty small, yeah. But it's okay.
But we'll go for it anyway and see how many we manage to firkle through. The first one I came across, and I thought this was a particularly poignant one, and again, the usual kind of thing, pertains here. We do bad news story or on climate or something like that, or two, just to kind of set a bit of a context, and then from there on out we're all about how technology is going to save the world. So on the bad news front, we saw this week the NOAA, the American Atmospheric and Oceanographic Association. Not association, I've forgotten what it is. I've forgotten what NOAA stands for, God almighty. But anyway,
I was hoping you would know, because I forgot about 10 minutes ago.
Let's just pretend we know. The NOAA, they announced the arrival of El Nino, and the last big El Nino we had was in '98, and that was the hottest year on the record of the human planet before 2014. Yep. And now we have another El Nino arriving, which means 2015 is poised to be the hottest year on record. And dovetailing with that, more bad news on the climate front is this one. It's that the Antarctic ice shelves apparently are now known to be melting dramatically, and this is a big study that has just come out, and it's showing that this one is particular to the western Antarctic ice sheet, but we had one last week which talked about the eastern as well. So the Antarctic ice sheets are melting dramatically at a rate that was unprecedented, and this this is important for lots of reasons. I guess really what we want to be aware of when it comes to this is the fact that, well, two things. First is when these ice sheets melt, we're talking about meters of sea level rise. That's the bad side. The good side is that it will take decades for this to actually happen. So we're talking, 10 feet of sea level rise by 2100. That kind of ballpark.
Yeah, so get your trip into Florida in now is basically.
There's no such thing as climate change in Florida, John.
No.
Have you not been following the news? It doesn't exist there. Come on, dude.
So
People literally have their heads in the fucking sand.
In the marshes.
Here's the interesting one. So because of the meltwater coming off the ice sheets in the northern hemispheres, the Gulf Stream is actually weakening. But one of the consequences of the Gulf Stream is that on the left-hand side, because the water is moving that way, it's actually lower. So when you actually stop the Gulf Stream or reduce it, that sea level rise comes up massively. So they say 10 meters, but there are going to be places in the world where, because of ocean currents, the sea level is lower. Sea level is lower than it should be because of the movement of the water. When that stops, it's just going to go boom.
And it's not, John, sorry, Chris. It's not just the currents, but and this blew my mind when I read it a couple of weeks ago. The Antarctic contains so much water in the form of ice that it has its own gravity.
Wow.
And as a consequence of that, when it melts, the water from it is going to flow to the north because you'll have reduced gravity pull. You'll have reduced gravity pull in the south, so the water is going to flow to the north. So that's why, particularly the northeast of the U.S. is going to feel it 25% on average more than the rest of the world because it's going to flow that direction because the pull is no longer there from the south.
Wow.
It's freaky stuff. I mean,
that is amazing.
Yeah, you missed it, John, but last week we showed a map of Antarctica with the continental US superimposed on top of it to give you an idea of the size of Antarctica. And the continental US fell into Antarctica with plenty of room to spare. Antarctica is enormous.
Is that Antarctica ice or is that Antarctica landmass?
It's a bit of both. It would show some of the offshore ice as well. But
yeah,
I mean, from recollection, I think Antarctica with the US superimposed on it, the US would probably have taken up about 2/3 of the landmass of Antarctica. So it's about 1.3 times the size of the continental US, and it has got kilometers of ice on top of it, and all that is well, all of it, no, not immediately, but that's the kind of in one of the articles this week it talked about how many 100 cubic kilometers every year, and it was something like 300 cubic kilometers of ice melting. I mean,
Tom, one thing that concerned me was that when I was preparing for the show, I was thinking about, I mean, obviously, when you have people in Florida legislature who are not even willing to talk about climate change, that's concerning. But then I think amongst more enlightened individuals who want to make a difference, there's still a perception that technology is going to come along and create some easy solution for these problems. And so I just did some research on this, and I pulled up an article right before our show from a UCLA faculty member from last year who met with colleagues from 6 other universities basically to do just that. They all had a hope that they could come up with a simple, rapid solution to minimize climate change, and they couldn't. And basically what it comes down to is that the solutions are hard. Now, the good thing is the solutions are not completely out of the realm of what we understand, in the sense that things like carbon emissions, cutting down on deforestation, which might mean dietary changes for a good chunk of North America, for example.
Yeah.
That these things are actually within reach, things that could actually not fix these issues, but actually slow down or buy some time or even minimize some of the fallout from this. And what I see is a lack of urgency because I think people still think that somewhere in some lab in Silicon Valley, someone's going to come out with some genius solution that solves these problems for us.
So
Yeah.
just to, you're right. You're absolutely right, John. And just to kind of try and explain why this is so hard to fix. So the half-life of CO2 in the atmosphere, in the upper atmosphere, is measured in millennia. People talk about methane as a greenhouse gas, and it is a significant greenhouse gas, but its half-life in the upper atmosphere is measured in weeks. So if it gets up there, it has an effect, but it's a short effect. Whereas CO2 half-life is measured in millennia. If it gets up there, it's going to take a long time for it to come down. Now, why that's important is because when we're talking about the amounts of CO2 that we're emitting, we're talking about enormous amounts. We're talking about literally billions of tons. We are emitting somewhere in the order of about 50 billion tons per annum into the upper atmosphere, of which about half of that is sequestered by plants and algae and things like that. So an average increase year on year of 20 to 30 billion tons of CO2 in the upper atmosphere. Now, if you think about the size of a ton of anything, and then think about the size of 100 tons, 1,000 tons, 1,000,000 tons, 1,000,000,000 tons. For us to try and get that CO2 back out of the atmosphere, to sequester it some way that it, reverses the effects, we're talking about hundreds of billions of tons of CO2. And we have to try and get it out of the atmosphere and put it somewhere where it won't go back into the atmosphere. The chances of that happening, I think, are pretty low, frankly, to have any negligible effect. So we're not looking at a situation where we can reverse what we've done. We're looking at a situation where we have to try and stop more of it happening, and we try and mitigate the effects of what is coming. So that's the harsh reality of where we are, and it's from that kind of a base that we try and move forward.
Yeah. No, it is tough.
So let's try and find some good news.
Yeah.
Well. The funny thing is,
now that I kicked everyone in the nuts.
Well, no. The funny thing is that we actually, to John's point, we do have a story about people actually making those hard choices and actually doing it and showing leadership in a way that most countries in the world aren't. And it would be easy for me just to reference the United States, but there are certainly problems in the UK that are not being, that we could be showing greater leadership. So
yeah.
But let's crack on.
Let's crack on. Let's do it. So the first story, and there's a couple here together that I want to kind of talk about. And have I stuck Chris on screen? I have.
You poor sod.
You're gorgeous, Chris. I know, but you weren't the one I was trying to highlight.
Okay, I can see the story.
So there's a couple here that kind of link together. Mm-hmm. So we'll go through the three of them together. The first is Google apparently have a plan to prioritize facts as opposed to non-facts, as in, so the search results that you get in Google, what they're kind of proposing here is that sites that don't tell the truth, sites that are full of bullshit, for want of a better expression, are going to fall further down in the results of a Google search. And the people who run climate denial sites are, kicking and screaming because they can see that this would affect where they appear in Google search results. And personally, that's a good thing as far as I can see. So there's that. There's this other story that we saw as well about how Mark Benioff from Salesforce stood up against the legalized bigotry that was happening, or that has happened in Indiana. Their governor in Indiana, Mike Pence, signed a law which makes it legal to discriminate against people based on their sexuality if you have, or if you claim to have, a religious reason for doing so. And then the third story, which is kind of loosely related to this as well, is one that I wrote myself on GreenMonk, and it's around IBM and how they're not doing stuff that they could be doing. And basically, it's they claim to have increased their purchase of renewables, but when you actually look into the numbers, the increase is from their 2013 figure of 17% to 20% by 2020. So they're increasing it 3% over 7 years, which is pretty unambitious. And the bottom line in this article, I say, is look, there are companies like the Google story we talked about, like the Salesforce story that we just referenced, where these organizations have actually decided to stick their necks out.
Yeah.
And that's in stark contrast to the IBM position there, where they're going 3% over 7 years and they're calling this a big deal. A lot of big companies now have influence, have purchasing power, have, in Google's place, have search results power to make a difference. Some of them are choosing to make a difference, and some are not. I think it behooves companies and organizations who can make a difference to do so.
Well, congratulations to IBM for raising the bar in such a timid manner. Timid. We're going to have to redefine what raising the bar means. We need like an asterisk now for, timid, modest raising of the bar. Like,
I was appalled when I read that. I was appalled when I read that.
But I just want to make one quick comment about this, which is I think that we're going to reach a point here where companies are going to be forced to take a position, because there are some pretty extreme views around some of these issues where, so Google is just trying to do what's right for search, and now they're being boxed into a bit of a political corner. And I think tech companies are going to be forced to take a position and say, which side of this are we on? Which is very interesting, because in the past it was really more about what's your valuation, your investment level is attractive to me, I'm going to buy your stock. And now we're starting to look at a possible scenario where companies really do take positions on which side of the fence on these issues they land on. And I applaud the companies that are starting to show, like the Salesforces and the Googles, that, hey, we have a custodial responsibility here, and this is reflected by our founders in everything we believe in, and we're not going to serve up crappy search results, because of political pressure. So I think it's going to be really interesting to follow this story along and see where it leads.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before we came on air, and Chris made the point that people will be kind of going, oh my God, Google are interfering with the truth. And, it was like, you don't think they've been doing that already? Manipulating the search results,
Exactly.
That's been happening for a long, long time now.
Yeah.
The thing is that when they are starting to parse the search results versus their own knowledge engine, and actually bring to the top stuff that is verifiable, it's actually a good thing.
Well, if you look at it even from an educational point of view and stuff like that, a lot of people use Google as a source of the truth, and reference it that way. And when you actually start to check the veracity of the facts through an algorithm, then overall you're improving the information quality that is actually there. So it depends what you're after. Are you after information, or are you after opinion? If you're after opinion, then Google is not the right search engine for you to use. If based on what they change their search algorithm actually looks like. If you're looking,
I don't know, Chris. If you type in a phrase and then add the word "sucks" after it. You should try it sometime. You'll find a lot of it.
Do you know what? I'm so tempted to write my name and say sucks and just see what comes out.
You might be
No,
surprised.
don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the episode of The Big Bang Theory where the three guys are going back to school to give a motivational talk to young women, and Sheldon's just about to type into Google what excites young girls, and everybody's like, no, don't. So yeah, so I'll not pull on that thread. I'm not going to pull on that.
No.
But in all honesty, though, I agree with what Google is doing with this fact-based referencing system, but I do think that in this case the climate change deniers who are upset about this are raising a point that is important to be aware of, which is that we're constantly getting our information filtered, and it's just important to understand that's why the onus is on us to be aware of that and to take everything under advisement in that regard, right? So,
and do we trust who's doing the filtering?
Yeah, Google's serving that up. Fox News has their own version of that. BBC has their own version of that. Everyone is filtering according to some priorities, and I think it's important to put on our little investigator hats and understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally agree.
Absolutely.
We'll move on to something else. And I saw during the week this story, which I thought was very interesting, and it talks about how the fact that Beijing are shutting down all their major coal power plants to cut pollution. I mean, we've seen, for quite a long time now how bad the issue of pollution has been, and thanks to the American embassy in part as well. How bad the issue of pollution has been in Beijing. The American embassy started tweeting out the particulate matter count in the air in Beijing, and it really shamed the authorities there into action.
That's such a brave move.
It was impressive.
A diplomatically very ballsy move.
It was very impressive. It was, and it had a serious impact, and it continues to do so. It wasn't the only thing, but it was a big thing. It was a big thing, and it brought it into the international arena in a big way.
Mm.
And so now we're seeing the Chinese shutting down all the major coal plants around Beijing, which should have a big effect on A, the air quality, and B, the carbon footprint in China. So this is, and I guess this is the difference between having a centrally planned economy versus did I say oligarchy? No, I meant a democracy like America.
Yeah. Is China a dictatorship or an autocratic regime? It's one of those weird ones. It's a communist-led country, but it's quite autocratic in how it actually functions.
It's a centrally planned economy. That much we know. The rest is kind of grey.
Yeah, but this is an example of one of those things that one of these hard decisions that John was talking about. They've taken a stand, and think back as to how old that power station actually is. If they're shutting down major power plants in several areas, it has to be costing them a lot of money, because a lot of China's power plants are not that old whenever you consider how long power plants actually last for and how long it takes to depreciate them.
Yeah, and they're going a lot further. I mean, China is now rolling out more wind and solar power than any other country in the world, and in fact almost more than all the other countries in the world put together. The amount they're spending and the amount of generation they're bringing online is phenomenal. It really is.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, you took a shot at America, but we're pioneering clean coal over here, so...
Scrubbing it before you burn it. I like it. Good plan.
Yeah.
We'll move on to some more of the stories, and there's a couple of related ones again that I saw that I thought were interesting, and I diss America from time to time, but this is a good story coming out of Texas of all places.
Wow.
Where there's a town in Texas called Georgetown, and Georgetown has gone in all in for renewable energy. It's a town in central Texas, and literally their utility company is abandoning coal and gas power plants, and they're going exclusively on wind and solar to meet all of their power needs.
Wow.
I mean, it's a small town. It's a small utility, and you know, where they're placed, they can do that because you know they're signed a contract for 144 megawatts of wind through to 2039, and that comes from a wind farm 50 miles west of Amarillo. You know, Texas is known for its oil and gas, but it also has phenomenal wind resources. It has phenomenal solar potential, which it is only just now starting to tap. And it has phenomenal geothermal as well along the Gulf Coast, which it hasn't tapped yet, but may well do. And it's not just Texas, but we had this story as well. John, you sent this to me during the week. I'd seen it already, but it's a lovely story of how Costa Rica has been using solely, the entire country of Costa Rica has gotten by solely on renewables for the last 75 days. That was reported 4 or 5 days ago. That might have changed in the meantime, but at the time of reporting it had been 75 days straight just from renewables. So, you know, these kinds of things, the shift to renewables, totally possible to do. And even if we look not just at Costa Rica and Georgetown, but if we look at the UK, we see that the UK had their largest fall in greenhouse gas emissions. That fall was over 8% last year, and this was in a time when the economy actually grew. So you know, this kind of stuff is completely doable. You know, we don't have to stick with fossil fuels. We can move to renewables. Now, to counterbalance the UK's one, the drop of 8% in emissions happening at a time of growth, it was good. But when you look at the actual numbers, what you see is that the UK is still at about 19% of its generation coming from renewables, which is pretty low. Here in Spain, we're at about close to 50% at this point. The US is down around 5-6%. I gotta think. So you know, I guess it's all you know.
But we talked about this before about how the US energy market is structured differently, you know, with longer term contracts and things like that. Surely over time, you know, these contracts run for 10, maybe 20 years. So you know, surely over time we'll see more people moving towards more central and state legislatures moving to more renewables as their existing contracts all run out. Yeah, we may see more of that. I don't know, John. You're our man in Havana, as it were, or you know, you would understand that better than I would. But you know, how do those types of contracts work over time?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is on a state-by-state basis, which makes things complicated here. And I personally have been very frustrated that the U.S. federal government has not provided adequate, in my opinion, subsidies for renewable energies to help foster entrepreneurial innovation and make the costs a little more feasible. But I do think that we're turning some corners because, like Costa Rica, for example, like, it's not a heavily industrialized economy there, and so it's a little easier for them to. They're in kind of a good position to go, you know, 75 days on all renewables.
One of the cool things that they've done, I mean, if you look at Costa Rica and what they've been doing for the last number of years, decades even, you're right, they're not heavily industrialized. But what they've decided to do is they've decided to prioritize ecology as opposed to industrialization for their economy.
Yeah.
And one of the really interesting things they did was they did away with their military. And so they don't have a military anymore of any kind. And they've diverted the spending into health and education. You know, it's when you see things like that happening, you know, I mean, that's hugely, you know, innovative and very brave. It's something Ireland should have done decades ago, because the fuck does Ireland need a military for? In fairness.
But what it makes me think is that if Costa Rica can do that, it even if you can't apply all of those lessons to a different country like the U.S., it certainly it blows the imagination out as to what is possible, which is very cool. You know.
Yeah.
By the way, on the tweet stream, Karine Tillotson has come out and said that when she lived in San Antonio, she chose windtricity for 50% of her utilities. I'm not sure what she means by 50% of her utilities, but windtricity obviously is available in San Antonio, which sounds like a utility which would be giving you wind energy. So, Texas, while you might not think it would be the obvious place, actually produces a huge amount of renewable energy.
Well, it's the panhandle, isn't it? All those fabulous dust storms and things like that. So
West Texas in particular is full of wind farms producing enormous amounts of wind energy.
Hot air in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll move on. A kind of corollary to that is this story, which I should have lumped in with the others, and it's about how the fact that American companies are now looking to put their data centers into Ireland, on Apple's example, because the climate in Ireland is cold, dark, grey, as you and I know.
I know.
But that's actually an advantage if you're trying to run a data center, because it's not hot and you can actually pull in outside air to cool down your machinery for you. The average temperature in Ireland, summer, winter, day and night, the average temperature is around it actually is around 10 degrees C. Yeah. And you want to bring your data centers down from, they could be up around 30. You want to bring them down to around an operating temperature of around, if you bring it down to, the ASHRAE says you can go up to 27. So, that means that the tolerance of the machines is actually, significantly even higher than that. But, a lot of data center operators want to keep them around 22 to 25, depending. So, if they're 35, 40, and you just open the doors, obviously you want to filter the wind for dust and stuff before it comes in, but what I mean, figuratively open the doors and let in the 10 degrees air from outside. It's going to do a lot of cooling there.
You need to remind me about filtering the air, because I've just had a look at my server under the desk and it's horrific with the dog hair and the dust. Oh jeez. Yes, I should have. I should get a better filter. It is fascinating actually. Having the data centers coming to Ireland is just phenomenal, because it's going to bring more money back in, and the workforce in Ireland is a highly educated workforce. So from that point of view, it is brilliant, and we have great comm links back and forward into the States.
And they're getting better. The Hibernia have just landed a 200 terabit cable in the data center, in the data center that I co-developed in Cork. They've landed that 200 terabit cable. That data center is now the best connected data center in Europe to North America.
Bloody hell! That's 10 times more than Kelvin, which comes into London area, isn't it?
Could be.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But the other interesting thing is also to do with the data privacy and things like that. There's obviously multiple facets to any decision like this. Climate and cost of data center and things like that being one of them, but also
connectivity is a big one too. Yeah.
Connectivity. Well, data centers are built on.
Yeah.
So they are, but it'll be interesting to see what sort of strain it's going to put on the electricity generation just in general.
I don't see it being huge, to be honest, because data centers, their draw of electricity is pretty flat. You get a slight increase during the day as a worker up, and a slight drop off in the evening, but it's still pretty flat. And each data center's draw is going to be about 100 megawatts. Big one is 100 megawatts. Smaller would be 50 thereabouts. Ireland as a country, its maximum draw is about 5 gigawatts during the summer.
Yeah.
So, and if you include Northern Ireland, it comes up to about 6.5 maybe. Throwing an extra 100 meg into that isn't going to make a huge difference. You just throw an extra few wind parks in there, and you should have that covered, pretty quickly. The biggest issue Ireland has in terms of power generation is if it builds a lot of wind energy and a lot of resources, there are times when the amount of renewables are going to exceed the demand. So in that case, you need to build interconnects between Ireland and the UK so it can sell some of it.
Either that or Elon Musk has to make good with some of those batteries.
Yes. I was going to say storage is the other alternative, and right now we're not there. The only storage in Ireland is Turlock Hill, which is a pumped hydro station in Wicklow, which will hold around 280 megawatt hours, which isn't really a lot.
Jesus.
We should move on though, because I think we've exhausted that one, and we should move into the transportation sector. Sector, whatever. And I'll get there.
Keep going, Tom. Keep going. Keep digging.
So I thought this was a beautiful story. 5 years after going on sale, God, I don't know what's going on here. My tongue is rebelling. 5 years after going on sale, the Nissan Leaf battery packs are now more reliable than the gasoline and diesel engines that they're competing against. So we saw that when Nissan came out with a Leaf 5 years ago, there was a lot of speculation that the batteries would pack up very quickly. But in fact, now that they've been on the market for 5 years, the batteries are still going strong, and they're saying that they have a failure rate of less than 0.01%.
Wow.
And that compares to 2.55% for vehicles which are on internal combustion engines. So 0.01 compared to 0.25, it's orders of magnitude better. So, and you pointed out that Michael Koch tweeted the difference between the running costs of a diesel engine that they have versus an EV that they have, and it turns out that the running costs for the diesel are 12.45 pence per mile versus the i3 electric at 4.4 pence per mile. So we're looking at running costs, savings of £80 per month, and running costs, 1/3 that of the diesel engine, and diesel is cheaper than petrol anyway. So the electrification of the transportation fleet is looking more and more like the right thing to do. Like why the hell haven't we done this years ago?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember the funny thing is when we talk about the battery packs, some of our viewers would probably be aware of a gentleman called Shai Agassi, who used to be
SAP.
One of the,
used to be at SAP. Better Place.
And then was it Better Place or Better Tomorrow?
Better Place.
Better Place. So the whole thing was actually was refueling your car with swappable battery packs at effectively sort of gas stations, and one of the things that was against them was was actually the lifespan of the battery pack and the reliability of the battery packs.
Yep.
That was something that investors, he couldn't quantify, or he had difficulty actually quantifying, and there were obviously other reasons as well. But seeing this research backs his original play, which I find massively interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Abesh was looking to try and find out where the chat stream is going on. And Abesh, there's two possibilities. You can do the chat stream just on Twitter using the Tech for Good hashtag, which is there in the lower third, or alternatively go to chat.
It's crowdchat.net.
My God, I'm losing the ability to speak today. I don't know what the hell is going on. Karen Tillotson on Twitter just said there that I obviously need a beer. So, if anyone wants to deliver a beer, apparently I need it. So it's crowdchat.net. If you go to crowdchat.net and search for the hashtag Tech for Good, you'll find it as well.
Yeah.
With that, we were talking about electric vehicles, and there was one other story in the electric vehicle one that I forgot to mention, and it was another one that I thought was interesting, and it was how electric vehicles, well, it was how actually the heat island effect that is seen in cities is actually caused by two main factors, and the first is internal combustion engines, and the second is aircon. And while we can't immediately affect aircon, we can affect the internal combustion engine by switching to the electrification of the fleet. And this particular study, and I'll throw the link into the CrowdChat feed there, this particular study coming out of Hunan and the US, Hunan in China and the US, showed that if you were to have switched the internal combustion engine fleet to electrical in I think it was 2012 in Beijing, you would have dropped the heat island effect. You would have dropped the temperature in the city by 1 degree centigrade, which is significant.
Wow!
Just by switching to electric vehicles. So, and that doesn't even account at all for the amount of pollution that would have gone away, the amount of particulate matter and the smog that they have in Beijing is due in huge part to the cars and buses and everything that are flying through the city.
Excellent.
I think one of the things I'm looking for now is the infrastructure. I think you can really make a great case when you're living in a sort of commuting type city where there's lots of charging stations and everything's pretty local. Like where I live in Western Mass, there's very few charging stations, and there's distances people might want to drive where it's not as feasible to simply own an electric car. So now you're talking about owning two cars, which isn't the most economically viable thing. I looked up Michael's car, and it's not a super cheap vehicle.
The i3 isn't. If I were recommending an electric vehicle, I wouldn't recommend the i3 as a first option.
Sorry, Michael.
I'm sorry, Michael. Yeah, it's true, but it's a four-seater.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a huge range. I mean, you can get a range extender for it, which then you get it's like the Chevy Volt that way. But that's a bit of a kludge, I guess.
But I do think what's interesting is some of the designs of the electric vehicles like Tesla's are really adding a lot of incentives by making a different kind of a driving experience. So it's not just switching over to a more efficient vehicle. It's kind of like a better vehicle in a lot of ways.
And what I love about what Tesla are doing is, they're completely changing the driving experience. They're completely changing what automotion is. They are pushing firmware updates over the air at night time.
Right.
So that when you wake up in the morning, you get essentially a different car. It's like on your phone getting an over the air update for your phone overnight and going from like iOS 7 to iOS 8 or Android 4 to Android 5. You have the same physical device, but you get a completely different set of functionalities potentially. And they a couple of weeks ago they pushed out a firmware update for the Tesla, which made it more efficient. It gave it better fuel economy. And that's almost that's got to be a head wreck for anyone who's in the traditional automotive industry.
Yeah.
Right.
This is something that nobody else is doing. Ford are starting to look into that now. They're teaming up with Microsoft to push out updates over using the Azure cloud platform that Microsoft has. But they're just starting on that route where this is something that's kind of baseline for Tesla. And Tesla, sure, the Tesla ones are incredibly expensive, but they're bringing out their new Model 3, I think they're calling it, later this year, which is going to be a much more affordable, probably still be beyond my reach, but it's going to be a lot more affordable car. So what they're doing, what they're really good at is pushing the envelope and pushing all the other manufacturers to join them and making the electrification of the transportation fleet actually viable. It's something no one else was going to do, but because they didn't have the legacy and the baggage and the potential stranded assets, it's something they can do.
Yeah. Great.
Shocked everyone into silence.
You have indeed. You have indeed. The interesting that I saw a thing. The BMW i8 is up for a design award, and I have to say, actually, it's one of those cars that is stunning looking. You know, you couldn't mistake it for anything else.
Sure, it's a nice looking car, but there's a beautiful infographic, and I'll find it afterwards because I haven't got it to hand right now. There's a beautiful infographic of the i8 versus the Tesla.
Yeah.
And, you know, the i8 has a range measured in tens of miles.
I know, it's so disappointing.
You know, and the Tesla is in the hundreds of miles. It's like, seriously, guys? Seriously? And
I'm waiting to see what Audi come out with in terms of their e-tron range. That is, I know they have the A3, I think, or the A1 coming out in it, and but that's one that I would seriously consider. I'm a big fan of Audi.
Yeah. So
guys, one more funny thing. I don't know if you noticed this story this week, but it's just an interesting thing because so this guy got a fine because he in Washington State he was using the ride commuter lane where you have to have more than one passenger in the vehicle, and he didn't, so he put a cutout of the most interesting man in the world in the passenger seat.
Who is the most interesting man in the world? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, that's the Dos Equis guy.
Yeah, and he even buckled him in. Like he was a person. And so the police pulled him over, but they were like highly amused, of course, right?
Yeah.
But I think what's the underlying thing, it's a very funny story, but the underlying thing that's interesting is it just shows how these kinds of changes do have impact. If this guy's desperate enough to risk a $150 fine to get in this lane, it just shows you that with a little more effort and intention, you can make a big difference on emissions, and electric is part of the puzzle, but other things like this are as well, because if you get to the point of putting cutouts in your car to try to get around the rules, it shows you these things are starting to work.
Yeah, definitely.
No, it's true. We're going to shift topics, a radical shift of topics. I'm trying to find a segue for this, but I'm failing miserably. And the topic we're moving on to now is Twitter's Periscope app, and so this is a new live streaming app which has been launched by Twitter, and it's to compete with Meerkat, which people may have heard of.
Yes.
Meerkat was launched, I want to say 6 weeks ago, and kind of took the world by storm. Exactly. Yeah. And it's a very easy to use live streaming app, Meerkat is, that you use on your phone, and basically you just press a button and suddenly you are broadcasting from your phone to the internet, and people can come in and see it and leave questions and all that kind of thing, and that's pretty cool. And so Twitter bought this company Periscope in January of this year, I think it was, and Periscope were already developing a live streaming application as well, and they met up with Twitter and decided there was a bit of synergy there, so Twitter bought them, and they released the Periscope app this week, and I tried it out a few times, and it's actually really good. One of the big differences between the Periscope live streaming app versus the Meerkat live streaming app is the Periscope one saves any of the live streams that you do, whereas the Meerkat one is kind of Snapchat type ephemeral in that as soon as you finish it goes away.
Yeah.
Both of them give you the option to save locally, so you can save it onto your phone. And upload it somewhere afterwards. But one of the cool things is that when you go into the Periscope app, you have the option of looking at ones that happened in the last 24 hours. So whereas if you go into Meerkat, there's nothing there if there's nothing happening right then. So it's cool. And I know that these kind of applications sound like a bit of a waste of time, or a bit trivial, but actually applications like this have proven very, very useful in things like the riots in Ferguson and in Taksim Square in Istanbul and places like that. These kind of apps there bring people on the ground, give people on the ground the opportunity to stream stuff from their phones straight to the internet live as it's happening, and get people into the story, and with the ability to record it as well. Obviously, then it can get played on the CNNs and BBCs and the news stories. But because it's live and you can get the story out as it's happening, it becomes very immediate and very useful and very hard to stop.
That is fascinating. I've been seeing references to Meerkat for about the past 2 weeks in my Twitter stream, and I'd never gotten around to looking at it. I thought it might have been another Vine or something like that, but that actually sounds really, really cool. Yeah. So it does. That sounds really cool.
Well, I'd like to offer my condolences to the Meerkat team. Your brief meteoric rise has landed in an increasingly large, shall I say, piece of farmland where Twitter buries its casualties. Twitter has become ruthless about this stuff, and but Tom, on the bigger technology for good scale, I completely agree with you. The implications of live streaming video are a lot more interesting than which brand comes out on top.
Yep.
And the other piece of it that's going to be very interesting to watch are things like law enforcement officers being required to wear cams at all times.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's going to solve these issues, but it's going to add a whole interesting dimension if officers are required to submit video.
There was a story, and I don't have the link to hand, but I saw a headline during the week with statistics coming out of San Diego, where they have apparently required the officers in San Diego to wear body cams. And the amount of complaints to the police had dropped something like 40%. The amount of taser instances, I guess, I'm not sure what word we're using here, had dropped by 20 to 30%. And a lot of these kinds of things, the heavy-handedness, I guess, had reduced, shall we say. So, I think the more, this is all about increasing transparency. It goes back to the point we were making at the start around the cloud providers. It's the more transparency you have, the better. It can only be a good thing. So having the live streaming platforms or body cams on police or whatever it is, as long as there was other stories a couple of weeks back about body cams and the suppression of evidence. So that's something that needs to be tackled as well, to make sure that there are processes in place to make sure that body cam evidence, is sacrosanct and cannot be tampered with.
For me, actually, it's interesting because, as you say, it is about transparency, but it's also about addressing the fundamental imbalance between if you are stopped doing something that breaking a not so well known law, in the opinion of the law enforcement officer, it gives you the ability to post-event actually go back and seek redress or challenge. And it's one of the places where the internet, for example, has become such an amazing force. It actually challenges informational imbalances. So where you have been challenged incorrectly, the actual body cam is able as an independent, effectively witness in the actual interaction to provide the capability for you to go back and say, well, this is what the officer said to me. Is that right? Is it not right? And from my point of view, it is about increasing transparency. But to a lot of people, it's about having it's a bad idea because it's having your homework marked. So it is, and they don't like having their homework marked.
Yeah.
So they don't.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to need to finish this hangout reasonably on time for a change. Because I have a 12-year-old who's coming back from a school trip, and he was 11 when he went on the school trip, and I haven't been able to talk to him since he went on the school trip.
You sent him away for a whole year. Was he that bad?
So he went off on the school trip last Friday morning, and there's no interaction allowed between the students who go on the school trip and their parents when they're away.
Yep.
He's been away on the school trip, like I say, since last Friday, and his birthday was on Tuesday. So he turned 12 on Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to getting him back this evening, and I got a WhatsApp message now to say that they're on the way back.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to getting him back this evening and wishing him a happy birthday and giving him birthday presents and stuff like that. So they're on the way back. So we'll plow on because I want to finish reasonably on time, as I said, so I can go and pick him up. So there was a couple of other stories that I wanted to touch on before we finish up. And one of those, I'm going to skip a few of the ones that we've marked, but one of those that I wanted to mention was the fact that WhatsApp have said that they are going to add voice calling to their iOS app in a couple of weeks. So that's pretty cool. Free voice calling using WhatsApp, and you know, while that's not such a big deal for us three guys, WhatsApp has got a massive penetration in the developing world, and the ability to have free calling using WhatsApp is going to change enormously the lives of a lot of people, like I say, in the developing world. So I think that is a huge story, which is well worth highlighting. Going on from there into more of a kind of a first world.
Excuse me.
Stop interrupting me, for Christ's sake.
I know. Sorry.
This is a Kickstarter, and this is the second last story we're doing today. But it's the third last story. Sorry, third last story we're doing today. But this is a Kickstarter for what they're calling Infinite USB. And I thought this was a cute one, and you can just see it here. They're stackable USB cables, so you can just plug one into the back of the other, into the back of the other, into the back of the other.
Love it, want it.
And great idea. Like I say, more of a first world issue than anything else, but still a nice one to have, because we all, are using USB hubs and stuff to power all our devices all the time.
Yeah.
Second last story. I thought this one was mad. These guys, these students, in what university was it? I've forgotten. It'll be in the stories here. Okay. In Fairfax, Virginia, George Mason University, founded eventually. They developed.
Tammy, this is where Tammy's in Fairfax, isn't she?
She's around there. She is. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. So they've developed a way of putting out fires using low-frequency sound. So they've got this device you can see here that they pointed at the flames, and they emit the sound, and the flames go out. They decided they started working on this first to put out fires in home. So kitchen fires, that kind of thing. Instead of using extinguishers or chemicals or anything like that, you would just point this device at it, press a button, the fire would just go out. And there's a video there. I have flash turned off on my browser here, so you can't really see it. But let's turn flash on there quickly, and you might be able to see it there. This is the device, and obviously it's a very early prototype at the moment. It would obviously, for a product to use in the home, it would obviously be a lot slicker looking than this. But they talk in the article about how the fact that
Wow.
just the fire's gone out. That's it. Boom. Simple as that. But they're talking about how some of the local fire authorities are looking to test it out on structural fryers. Now you need to scale it up, obviously, for something like that. But boom, fire's gone.
Well, the thing that goes straight through my head is actually data centers. In fire halls, you can't use obviously water or powder or on those fires, even though they are electrical fires. You have to use halon gas and things like that. But those have their own challenges.
The best from the data center that we put up, we found the best one to use was nitrogen. In fact, it's a lot easier to refill the bottles if you have to do a discharge. Having said that, though, there's nothing flammable in a data center really.
No, but you can get the fuel load in the data center would be extremely low, but it still is something that they have to prepare for.
It's ticking the insurance box more than anything else. But you rarely hear of data centers, taking out blocks in cities or anything like that. They just.
I've sat in compliance meetings and business continuity meetings. You don't say things like that in continuity meetings. What's the actual likelihood of this to happen? That's how you get yourself thrown out. Do you know what? I should say that because that's how you get thrown out of those types of meetings. I hate those meetings. They're so boring. They really are.
Okay, the last story of the day is another Kickstarter, and I thought this was a lovely one. It's called a Naked Filter, and great name. And it's basically it's a filter. It's you can just see it inside this water bottle here, and actually. This is it down here as well. It fits into this water bottle. This is a specially made water bottle for it, but it could fit into almost any water bottle because it plugs into the back of the top of the water bottle.
Yes.
And it filters out a lot of chemicals. It filters out bacteria. It filters out viruses. So you can literally dip this into almost any water source and just suck from the nipple on the water bottle, and you get pure, clean water.
Wow.
It's a genius idea. If you look, this is a Kickstarter again. If you look at the Kickstarter, they're selling for about $25 US per bottle, complete with a filter. So for $25, now $25 isn't a lot to you and I. No. But where this needs to be is in, again, the developing world, the places where people have a difficult time getting access to water. And for people there, $25 is a lot. So they need to bring down the pricing significantly, down to about $5, I would say, per bottle. And these refills, they are refills. When they discharge, you slot in a new one and go again.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for them because the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have funded a device. I think one or two devices very similar to this, which are being used heavily in the developing world. This is an outdoor person's.
Yeah, the beauty of this is it doesn't require any energy. A lot of these filters require high pressure. They require energy to push the water through. This is low pressure. This is literally you just stick it in your mouth and you suck, and that does the filtration.
Yeah.
It's a really nifty solution. Whether they can get the traction, whether they can, as you say, maybe it's a first world, outdoor campers tool. And, which is fine too. I mean that's an okay market as well. But where people really need access to clean water is more importantly is in developing world.
It's a lovely.
I love the Bill Gates poop water story because it was great. It was great that he was willing to drink his poop water so publicly. He even went on. I think it was Jimmy Fallon.
Yes.
Challenged him to drink the poop water also.
Oh God!
And to me, like that's the big thing is getting over people's fears, right? Because a lot of times the tech brings fear and apprehension with it, and and this is water you've never drank in the past, right? Or a stream that might have been contaminated in the past, and it's not just the invention, but it's the cultural change, and I love that people are willing to say, okay, I'll drink out of that, you know. Just like the people that invented Soylent. I'm not a real Soylent guy, but like we're gonna live on this stuff for a while, and show you that it works. I think that's pretty cool. If you can drink your own poop water, I think that really is technology for good right there. And the same with that bottle. You know, if you're gonna invent it, great. Now go out and put it in a muddy, horrible stream and start drinking, and I'll be convinced.
Yeah. And you know, in one of the in part of the video, they do actually drink from the water from a stream. Now, I guess video you can always cut and paste, but the filtration in it is down to, if I remember correctly, 0.2 micron, which is
0.2,
which is pretty impressive.
Yeah,
pretty impressive. And what they say about the filter is it's a completely different type of filter, and they say that what it does is it starts to build up. So you get to a point where you have to suck really hard to get anything out of it, and that's that point that you just change it out, so you know when it's done.
Right.
It's not that anything can get through it. It becomes, just the stuff builds up in it, and it ceases to function, and then that's when you replace it. So I really like it, and I really want it to succeed. I just suspect it's not going to succeed where it is needed most.
Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't hit that price point.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're done, guys. It's been a really good show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, guys.
We'll be back again next week, same time, same bat channel, and thanks everyone for your interest and for stopping by.
Cheers.
Enjoyed it, Tom.